Hey, what's up, mortals? It's Fallon Echo here with a new video for you. Welcome to Season 2, Part 4 of What If Deku Became an Android. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So we begin. The number one hero was currently in his skinny form, unable to enter his muscled state.
We're suffering a villain attack worse than one in the USJ. I can't provide any kind of reinforcement. What kind of teacher am I? What kind of hero am I?
He lamented. Calm down, Toshinori. Nezu started. The large majority of the people have already been evacuated. You'll be recharged in less than an hour from now, right? I'm sure Endeavor and the others can keep the villains under control until then.
I understand that. It's just, I can't stand waiting around doing nothing while our students are forced to fight.
The symbol of peace complained. I'm sure they're doing fine. The reports indicate that there are only 2 villains there. Logic dictates that a small army of heroes and heroes in training shouldn't have any issues dealing with them. Nezu assured All Might. At the arena, the heroes and students had plenty of issues dealing with the 2 villains, however. Deku was the last student standing in the battle against Android 16. All around him, his classmates lay beaten and battered, but the Greenette fought on as determined as ever.
Promise you I wouldn't lose, you goddamn machine!
The student yelled. He ran up to the tall android and started trading blows with him. Usually every punch the teen took would send him staggering backward, but in his current state, it's as though he couldn't feel them. Every time one of his classmates' unconscious bodies hit the ground, he grew stronger. It's as though his rage gave him power. From up high in the grandstands, the pro hero Edgeshot stood between 3 UA students. They were attempting to gauge the best way to get all the bodies littering the ground out of harm's way, while helping Izuku deal with the potent threat.
Although I'd love to figure out where the old man went, all our aerial forces are out of action.
Edgeshot started, clenching his fist.
That monster. Regardless, we won't let this one escape,
the pro hero said.
You should all head down and levitate the bodies out.
Edgeshot sighed before continuing.
Giro, was it? Listen for which bodies have heartbeats and prioritize those ones. I'll cover you. I don't think the brute can afford to be distracted against your classmate there and me. His power has been increasing significantly throughout the battle.
At that, Edgeshot dashed down the debris-filled stands as though it was a clear track. The 3 girls were having a much harder time, trying their best to sidestep or levitate the debris in their way. As they reached the battleground, Giro closed her eyes and stuck her earphone jacks in the ground. She didn't want to see which bodies didn't have heartbeats. From what she heard, most of the bodies with heartbeats also happened to be the ones in close proximity to the active battle. But there were 2 at the other end of the field. Eyes still closed, she pointed right at the 2 places the heartbeats were coming from.
Most of the heartbeats are coming from the area right beside the fight. So get those 2 out first.
The purple-haired girl ordered. She heard her 2 fellow students dash away. Kyoka dared to open her eyes and glanced over to where Izuku and Edgeshot were fighting the green-vested robot. With every punch the Greenette took, with every blast of energy he dealt, Jiro was further reminded of what she needed to tell him. How would she do it? The girl had rehearsed the scenario a million times in her mind. Every time the result she imagined was different, but there wasn't a single time where it was good. Jiro was forced out of her thoughts by the sound of coughing. Ochako had returned, with a hero Jiro recognized in tow. It was the number 2 hero, Endeavor, though he was very clearly in no state to be doing any heroic activities. The man's eyes were replaced with bleeding holes, as though someone had shot through them with lasers. What? Jiro said in shock. Then the disgust hit her and she turned to vomit. But before she was able to, the purple-haired girl was slapped in the face. The hit pushed the urge to vomit back down, and Jiro turned to stare into the angry eyes of Ochako Uraraka. Jiro! We're heroes, remember? Now come on, we need to patch up Endeavor! The brunette said aggressively. Since her first real talk with Ochako, Jiro had been increasingly impressed with the girl. I wish I was as good of a hero as she is. Jiro thought, applying first aid to Endeavor's various corporal injuries, while Uraraka attempted to apply bandaging where his eyes once were. Riko Yanagi, the other girl that had come with them, returned with a now conscious student the 2 girls recognized. Though Giro didn't know his name, she knew he was a third year who had been heralded as the second All Might. But now he was just like all the other beat-up UA students covering the battlefield. Blood trickled out of his ears and his face was screwed up. Hold on, he said, struggling to utter any words. The third year clutched his head in pain, hand and arm shaking. You must have taken a serious blow to the head, Ochako said, her tone shockingly grim. I don't think there's much else we can do to fix him up, Riko said, choosing not to react to Ochako's statement. We need to get everyone here to the hospital. We need more people, Jiro said, almost hysterical. Everyone is evacuating the civilians, injured or worse. We're all that's left, Ochako said, as aggressive as Jiro was panicked. Every second we leave them here, the risk of them getting hit by some stray energy blast gets bigger. The brunette grabbed hold of the other two girls' shoulders and tried to shake some sense into them. We can't just sit here, the brunette continued. You're right, let's go save them. We're heroes, Jiro said. She was trying to convince herself more than anyone. After all, as of late, she couldn't say she'd been feeling anything like a hero. The three of them then leapt into action. First, they headed to the outskirts of the area where the battle was taking place. It didn't seem like any of the three fighters had noticed the three girls. Jiro headed over to where Tenya Ida was lying, painstakingly put the taller boy over his shoulders, and ran out of the battle zone. As she was running, she noticed something that, had adrenaline not been pumping through her as of right now, would have likely caused the girl to pass out. Kamui Woods lay next to the grandstands, but there was something missing from him. More specifically, his entire head seemed to have been blown off by something. But it was as if Kyoko couldn't process what that meant. Maybe the adrenaline was delaying any thought that would stop her from functioning properly, or maybe what was happening was so far detached from anything the girl had ever imagined that she couldn't really process anything. The three girls dropped off the unconscious students at the stands next to Endeavor and the now groaning Mirio. Without wasting any time, they headed back to pick up more classmates. Jiro tried to keep her vision tunneled on her next target, ignoring anything except for the obstacles presented by the ongoing fight. Like that, the three girls were able to bring all their fellow students and pro heroes out of the danger zone. All right, we need to move everyone up to the grandstands into the evacuation route, Ochako said. The three girls each grabbed a rescuee. Jiro looked over to the fight and whispered, You can do this, Deku. This video is sponsored by Adobe. Adobe is redefining the digital experience through game-changing innovations that shape the next generation of storytelling. Adobe makes it easy to create, edit, and share digital documents securely, allowing you to collaborate and communicate across devices. Adobe Photoshop is your go-to application for faster graphics editing and digital art as a whole. At We the Celestials, all our thumbnails across every channel are created with Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Premiere Pro is a timeline-based and non-linear video editing software application that is versatile and easy for beginners and master editors. Finally, Adobe After Effects is the industry-standard tool for digital visual effects, motion graphics, and compositing applications used in post-production. Many of our voice actors, myself included, audio editors, and video editors use Premiere Pro and After Effects to produce these high-quality videos. Click the link in the description to start creating now, and thank you to Adobe for sponsoring this video. Deku didn't think he'd be able to do this much longer. After all, the hits he'd tanked purely through his increasing rage had still landed, and they weren't mosquito bites. Regardless of his stamina being infinite, his durability was limited. If he wanted to stay in this fight any longer, he'd have to start being more careful. Edshaw was quickly realizing that this boy, this UA student that he was fighting alongside, was stronger than him. This boy is stronger than Mirio. If I could, I would put him in the top 10 pro hero rankings, Edshaw was thinking. The pro hero's attacks couldn't harm the brute, and he served to only distract the machine from Deku's energy and physical blows. But this kind of high-speed, intense battle quickly following his other high-speed, intense battle with the old man was taking its toll on him. As Edgeshot dashed in for a hit and run, he misjudged the length of his enemy's arm and was sent flying as a result. Deku noticed the pro hero getting sent flying out of the corner of his eye. He'd have to be much more careful so as not to share the same fate as Edgeshot, but Android 16 had different ideas.
This has gone on long enough. You are a failure. I will properly dispose of you this time.
The machine said emotionlessly. Try me! The teen yelled, dashing towards 16. Sure enough, the larger android landed his strongest hit yet, stopping Deku in his tracks, before grabbing his face and slamming him downward. As soon as his back hit the ground, all the hits he'd taken throughout the fight seemed to crash down onto him now. Pain coursed through every fiber of his being, and he was barely able to move anymore. Android 16 walked up to him, looking down in disappointment.
The doctor had high hopes for you, Android M.
He said. Izuku heard the words, but he didn't understand them. All he was thinking about was how he could get up, keep fighting, and beat this monstrous machine. 16 raised his foot and stomped down onto Deku, making a deep crater in the arena with the green net at its center. The android removed his 2 rocket fists, tucking them under his arms. The sight was all too familiar to Deku. Energy began charging in his arm cannons. Try as he might, Deku couldn't budge an inch, let alone climb out of this crater. His limitless stamina was useless if he was in too much pain to even charge a Justice explosion. Up on the grandstands, Jiro was beyond panicked at the sight before her. Edgeshot and Deku lying unmoving, with that monster of a machine standing above her classmate charging an attack. We need to... Jiro started. She cut herself off when she noticed that Ochako was nowhere to be seen. She looked down and saw the brunette charging towards the crater. Uraraka had sent Edgeshot a bit higher up to the stands with her quirk and was rushing towards Deku now. What's she doing? Kyoka thought. Uraraka! The purple-haired girl heard Edgeshot yell. He was unable to stand but had regained consciousness. She looked up at Riku Yanagi, who was stunned into silence. Jiro then answered her own question. She's being a hero. Deku hadn't accepted his fate. He wasn't prepared to die lying down in a crater. But at this rate, he wouldn't have much of a choice. I'm not done! He managed to yell. His voice didn't reach Android 16 over the sound of energy charging. The blast this time would be far stronger and more concentrated than the one Deku had survived at the USJ. If it hit him, he would be reduced to dust. The next sequence of events took a few seconds, but Izuku saw the whole process in slow motion. Ochako Uraraka, of all people, leapt into the crater. Without saying a word or wasting a moment, she grabbed the boy and flung him into the stands with her quirk. Then Android 16 yelled, Hell's Flash! Maximum output! The moment the last word exited his mouth, a massive wave of energy exited his arm cannons. Like at the USJ, the amount of energy was so great that it ravaged the ground in a huge radius around the crater. The stands were shaken and the field itself looked like it had been bombed. Though unlike at the USJ, there was enough energy in the blast to completely annihilate whatever it came in contact with. Deku stopped floating moments after the attack was launched. As he fell into the stands, shaking from the attack, he kept his eyes peeled on the crater where the attack landed. As the smoke cleared from where the crater once was, he saw something more comparable to a sinkhole, and he saw no sign of Ochako Uraraka. Android 16 quickly realized that his target wasn't dead, and began marching slowly towards Deku, who he knew couldn't move. But the greenette didn't care. He didn't take his eyes off the hole, though his mind was elsewhere. All he could think about were his memories of Ochako. She never liked me. She never even tolerated me, he thought, his eyes still on the crater. She's gotta be alive, right? She wouldn't sacrifice her life to save me of all people, right? She hates me, right? Deku's thoughts received no validation, not even from himself. He clenched his fist, tears leaking down his face. She's an amazing hero. I wish I could have made up with you.
I wish I could have properly apologized. I wish you...
He couldn't finish the thought. Ochako Uraraka was dead. There was no way around it. Just like Kamui Woods. Just like Bat Gum. Just like Hawks. She had been murdered by the two monsters that attacked them. Deku raised his head, looking at the slowly approaching Android 16, with more hatred than he'd ever had in his eyes before. Kyokajiro was in a state beyond panic. She felt the crushing pain of knowing that another one of her friends, the girl she'd come to admire and respect, was gone at the hands of these villains. She felt the fear that she would be next. And Riku, Deku, and everyone at UA. She felt despair, knowing that none of them could compare with the power of the android. Tears welled up in her eyes. She felt like vomiting and screaming at the same time. Pain racked her emotionally as well as physically, and her ears began ringing. It's as though her senses were going haywire from shock. Nothing. I'm useless. I should just do everyone a favor and... Her thoughts were interrupted. She remembered her motivation for joining the sports festival. If I don't tell him now, I'll never get the chance. It was as if Jiro's mind latched on to the one thing, the one goal, keeping it from collapsing into complete and utter despair, and hung on to that goal at the cost of any other thoughts in her mind. The purple-haired girl ran up next to the greenette and said 3 words. "You're a cyborg!" Izuku Midoriya heard the words, though they didn't surprise him. In his subconscious, he'd already put the pieces of the puzzle together, and he hadn't disregarded 16 referring to himself as Android M. His mind just had been stopping him from truly processing it. After all, the concept was so ridiculous that it couldn't be true. But now that he heard the words, his subconscious received validation, and his mental floodgates opened. At the worst possible time, Izuku's mind was already on the verge of snapping as he processed the deaths of Ochako and the other heroes, and now his humanity was put into question. At that point, Izuku didn't have any thoughts. The information had effectively overloaded his brain. His mind was empty, and his heart guided him. All the emotions he was feeling were funneled into a singular, primal human instinct that no modifications could take from him. Rage. Deku got up as though 16 had never even touched him. An aura of green energy was glowing around him, and his eyes showed anger. Anger that blocked away all else. "I'm gonna rip you apart!" he yelled. Deku's sudden boost in power didn't only come from his unprecedented rage. It came from a shift in his goals. Previously, he wanted to win. Now, he just wanted 16 to lose. Or more accurately, he just wanted 16 to die. And every molecule of his enhanced body was working overtime for his goal to be achieved. Deku dashed at insane speeds towards 16. The machine tried to intercept him but was too slow. "This one's for Suyu!" The greenette yelled, landing a punch that sent 16 reeling. "This one's for Mineta!" Deku said as he landed a flying axe kick on the android, sending the robot crashing onto the ground beneath him. "And this one's for Ochako!" He yelled as he charged an energy attack between his hands. "Justice! Gravity!" He leapt above his enemy and fired an energy blast, with a radius the size of the android he was aiming the attack at. It was as if every single memory he'd had since joining UA, no, since he'd admired heroes at all, was fueling the attack. Deku could practically feel Android 16 becoming completely annihilated by the attack. As the green light faded from the greenette's hands, nothing remained of his green-vested opponent. Izuku dropped to the ground. "Stay down," he said into the crater he'd made before collapsing with exhaustion.